Welcome Virgo to your in-depth monthly forecast for November 2023 for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout details to look out for, but please stay with me. I will explore in much greater depth all the ins and outs particularly relevant to your sign. Now I have to say I'm really excited about the 4th because Saturn, the planet of limitation, ends a retrograde in your sector of relating, which began in the middle of June. In general, if relationships have been harder going since the 7th of March, when Saturn moved into your 7th house, wouldn't be a surprise. But also Venus in your sign forges a magical link to Neptune in week 1. So can't wait to tell you about that. And also Venus on the 8th can do your financial situation the world of good when it moves into your 2nd solar house, where it will be for the rest of the month. Please stay with me for more. With year 2024 speeding towards us, if you order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast now, I'll prepare the rest of year 2023 for you, free of charge, but also in my special package of 30% off, I'll prepare for you your character analysis report, your life roadmap. This will give you searing insights to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but helping you to get a much more intimate understanding of how to work with these in a really adroit way. Please see the link beneath this video for more information. So Virgo, as you make your way into November, there's a real sense of excitement around you, I feel, because the Sun, Mercury, your ruler, and also the passionate energies of Mars are all lined up in the sign of Scorpio, which is a water sign. So how does that relate to you being an earth sign? Well, think at the bottom of every river is the river bed, which is earth, and that carries the water. So earth and water conduct very well with one another. It's a little bit like fire. You can't have fire unless you have oxygen, the air. So I feel that the combination of the Sun, Mercury and Mars being in your 3rd house is very Gemini-like in a way, but of course that's ruled, like your sign, by Mercury. It's a quick energy, it can be a bit impatient, but it's terrific for interacting with other people and creating a lively vibe. And you know, the first week of this month is definitely going to be lively for you because Mercury, your ruler, is in an opposition with the planet of the unexpected, Uranus, which has a very electric feel, and it's pushing you in house 9 to widen your horizons and really discover the part of your nature that really feeds your need to be a freer individual rather than just to fulfill obligations and responsibilities, which you can do in spades. You know, that's your great gift, being utterly reliable and consistent and practiced in what you do. That's really great stuff. But sometimes we do need to feed our soul, and I think this combination of Mercury and Uranus is pushing you to be a bit more daring, to do something more spontaneous, to take a day off, to ring in and say, look, I'm going to take a day off because I just need some space, and that can be very cathartic. But also the Sun and Jupiter are in a polar opposite as well across the same 2 signs. So like Mercury, the Sun is in Scorpio, and on the other side of the heavens, Jupiter, like Uranus, is in the sign of Taurus. But this creates 3rd, 9th house energy. If you've yet to head off anywhere this year, perhaps circumstances haven't allowed, perhaps there's something you've wanted to do that's just breaking the mold, being more spontaneous. If you're someone, for example, who has often thought that you'd love to do something a bit more rugged and vigorous, I'm not saying necessarily you want to throw yourself out of an aircraft for a charity parachute jump or abseil up the side of a hospital in order to raise money for a good cause, but if there is something that you've always thought might really tickle you by being a bit more daring, and it is a physical challenge, that could be something that really attracts you week 1 of this month. But equally, Virgo, it could be something that you just stimulate your mind through. So if you find yourself attracted to a course, to download some information, to read much more on a different philosophy, to pursue a language course, to learn to play a particular instrument or to read music. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it stimulates you. So the potential for stimulation is incredibly strong at the start of this month. But if you decide that you're just going to keep going through your normal processes because that's what you feel comfortable with, that's fine. It's whether you are actually feeling penned in and dissatisfied. And if that's the case, don't let inertia stop you from experimenting and doing something fresh, because it really will add an extra spark to your existence. Now, I mentioned in the intro about Saturn. So Saturn joined Neptune on the 7th of March this year. Neptune's been in your sector of relating since 2012. Some magical things have happened since then for you, or perhaps you've got into a situation only to realise that perhaps it wasn't quite as good as you would have hoped, because Neptune can, in some ways, not necessarily deliberately mislead us, but it can sort of, let's put it this way, the packaging and the promotion can be more of what something is about rather than the substance. And that might be true of an alliance that you forge, whether it's with a friendship, with a group that you're drawn to, or one individual person. And I think since the start of March, things have tightened up. You become much more conscious of what isn't quite as good as you would like. But the good thing about the 7th house is it can also help you to set your boundaries. So since Saturn went retrograde in the middle of June, if there has been something that you haven't been happy with, although it may have seen you felt a bit grisly at times, you may have put your foot down and said, no, I'm not doing that. And maybe it's at work. Maybe you're the person that's always covered for colleagues in the past, and maybe you've been said, no, I've asked you to cover for me, you won't do it, I'm not doing it. So you become a little bit more singular in your responses. Not a bad thing at all. However, as this month begins, Venus in your sign, which technically, as you probably know, is not at its best, it's in full. Venus in your sign is pushing you to change your personal identity in some way. Maybe through a haircut, maybe through using some different approaches to how you look after your teeth or your skin, or maybe some new clothes. Anything which gives you extra glam and a sense of attractiveness has definitely been a good thing to do. But Neptune's in the mix in the start of this month. There could be someone, especially with Saturn coming to the end of that retrograde, and also the electric energies going between your 3rd and 9th house, someone who really grabs your interest, your attention at the start of this month, and could make your pulse really race. But the key with Neptune is, as I mentioned before, is the substance going to be as good as what you think or hope will be the case? So something can be a little bit hard to understand. Someone can be very, very interesting, perhaps a little bit mysterious, but then not really, the interest may not firm up, or they don't give you the signals that make you feel secure about the situation. But if they do, you could be really smitten. But then on the 8th, Venus moves out of your sign. And I can almost guarantee with regularity that Venus moving into the 2nd solar house will trigger some good news. And I say this not lightly, because obviously we've all dealt with higher costs, but you could have some stroke of fortune, some serendipity. Someone can be very generous to you, or you could find yourself equally finding it a bit more difficult to stick to a diet. And the reason for that is Venus, although it's arriving in the sign of Libra, it also rules your sister Earth sign of Taurus, and there it's much more to do with food and sensual pleasures. And so Venus in the 2nd house is redolent of that Taurus energy. So if you're not feeling so good about yourself, there could be a tendency to comfort eat over the next few weeks. But if you are wanting to have some kind of uptick around your finances, you could have it. The key with Venus in the second house is sometimes we get a little bit of good luck, bit of serendipity, but we find it very difficult to hold on to whatever that fortune creates. Now the 10th sees your ruler Mercury move into the sign of Sagittarius. This is really important for a number of reasons. This is because Mercury is going to go into your sister Earth sign of Capricorn on the 2nd of December, but it's actually going to go into a retrograde mid-December, and then the last week of the year it's going to go into a retrograde in Sagittarius. So the first of the fire retrograde season that we're going to have all of next year with Mercury comes right at the end of this year, because all the Mercury retrogrades have been in Earth signs, and obviously including yours. So Mercury moving into the 4th house, 1, it's in detriment in the sign of Sagittarius, but 2, the 4th house can see us circulating thoughts around our mind about our emotions but not doing anything about it. And also Mercury immediately clashes with Saturn despite it going forwards. So for 3 days I feel you could be prone to some disagreements with someone that you're close to. Maybe it is a live-in partner. You could find yourself being a bit defensive, a bit niggly, a little bit irritated if that other person isn't very good at tuning into how you feel, but without a conversation. Because Mercury in the 4th house can be a bit tongue-tied. However, the 13th sees a glorious new moon in the sign of Scorpio, which, remember, the water you carry very, very well in your earth riverbed. But this particular new moon has Mars in the mix. When the moon and Mars are in a conjunction, an opposition or a square, it can create volatility, to be honest. But the 3rd house is a very agile energy, as I mentioned before, kind of Gemini-like. It's kind of swift moving. If you're somebody who's decided that after a week of breaking your diet, you're going to sort of put yourself into a more disciplined mode, you could find yourself being very active in the following month. Now, whether it's swimming, cycling, walking, quick short bursts, aerobics, just walking quickly between the lampposts, which we sometimes try to do, and it can be really good fun because we always end up really giggling and probably stopping, one of us does, before we get there. But it can be good to have that quick burst of energy. So if you are someone who does take your physical fitness really seriously, if you do those kind of gym circuits, that would be really in keeping with this particular new moon. But the 3rd house can also be to do with short journeys and transport. And of course the cost of transport has become so much greater. So some people are looking at alternative things, whether it's electric scooters, which of course are very controversial. Electric bikes are great fun. And that could be something you consider if you're wanting to get your costs down, but be more flexible in your mode of transport. Or you may just want to get off the settee, stop being the born-again couch potato that I am, and be that much more active. But also the 3rd house, of course, can be about ideas, and Mars can be very passionate. And over the following 4 weeks, whereas Mercury being squared up with Saturn could have seen you a bit tongue-tied, if there is something you really want to get off your chest, you're going to do it from this new moon. But also, if you live around neighbours that you don't like very much, who tend to sort of irritate you a little bit, you might, maybe the fence that needs repairing, you know, you're happy to go halves, they feel it should all be your responsibility. That kind of stuff. The 3rd house can be neighbours, or it's a sibling that always expects you to look out for your elderly parent and all they seem to do is criticise. You could be much more outspoken in pushing back. So whatever your situation, expect to find your voice But the key with the third house is to make sure you're engaged in your emotions, because the third house is the first thought that comes into our heads, and Mars can be very impatient, so you could end up saying something quickly which you could then feel was a bit rash. So your ruler Mercury is saying to you, particularly in Sagittarius, to try to slow things down, get fully informed. Sagittarius is very much about knowledge. And also from the 18th to the 22nd, the Sun forges a marvellous link with Pluto. So if you are feeling full of beans around an idea you've got, you're feeling expressive and enthusiastic, you can really excite those people you connect to, because Pluto is very much about transformations. If you're single, this can be an extremely intriguing part of the month from the 18th through to the 22nd. But then on the 22nd, later in the day, followed by the 24th, the Sun and Mars move into your fourth house to join up with Mercury. Also, Mercury squares up with Neptune in your opposite sign from the 25th to the 30th. That can create some mixed signals, cross wires, confusion. If you're buying and selling anything, I'd really be very cautious. Also, if you're trying to arrange anything for Christmas, for example, the messages you get back from relatives could be rather unclear as well. And you could feel just a sense of impatience if things aren't moving quite as quickly as you would like. If someone's not listening to how you feel, if you have been feeling frustrated and you feel that you've really got the message across and someone's still being rather distant or defensive and not really tuning into your position, I think the fact that the Sun and Mars square up with Saturn across the 23rd to the 26th could see things being quite tense. Then we have a full moon on the 27th in your sister mutable sign of Gemini, and of course this is governed by Mercury as well. So here the moon sees your Venus quite close to the surface because the 10th house is like that, but Gemini is not great at feeling the emotion. It's more about trying to sort of be a bit quick-witted. And then T-squaring this particular event is Saturn. So whether it's at work or at home, I feel the month could end with quite a lot of tension, even some rancor washing around. And most of all, it's where you don't feel heard. So even though Saturn goes direct on the 4th, you can see that Saturn retains an incredibly influential impact, squaring up with your ruler Mercury from the 9th through to the 12th, and also squaring with the Sun and Mars from the 23rd to the 26th, and then it's applying in a T-square to the full moon. So in other words, your perception of what a relationship is about or how you interact might not be somebody else's view of how you are going about things. And someone could be quite strict or stern or a bit cool or standoffish. It's not necessarily a month which is going to flow exactly as you expect. So it's going to be very important to still consider that Saturn, wherever he is always asking us to work. So whether you are a Virgo or you have a Virgo ascendant, or you're someone who has placements that are affected by Saturn being in the sign of Pisces, we always have to be aware of how Saturn's impacting us. And he's never not impacting us. There may be times that it's a bit more providential, maybe times that it's a bit more neutral, but he's always impacting us at all times. And the key is about learning lessons. So the lesson for Virgos essentially over the next couple of years still is, how do other people perceive me? How do I behave in relationships? Am I expecting the same thing from others that I give to them? Because if that isn't the case, that can create a problem, because that can create resistance and resentment. So it's going to be a bit of a crash course still around relationships, despite the fact that this month begins with a lot of very bubbly energy being exchanged, a magical link between Venus and Neptune, a potential uplift in your finances from the 8th. As the month goes on, still working at that relationship dimension is going to be vitally important to your situation. And as I say, it could be you who's bending over backwards to give it everything, and it may be someone you're involved with or in your family who's just doesn't seem to get what you do, which can cause huge frustration. Just keep working on what you can influence, which is essentially your responses, trying to understand much more why people are with you the way they are, and that will see you ending this month more informed.